Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2 Chronicles, the 32nd chapter, and still dealing with the at this time we know that Hezekiah is the king of the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom has been deported, right, and by the Assyrians. So in secular history, this is still around the time of the Assyrians being in power. But basically, now under the reign of Sennacherib. So this is 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 1. After these things and the establishment thereof, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and entered into Judah, and encamped against the fenced cities, and thought to win them for himself. So Sennacherib comes, he comes by and tries to take over Judah, like the Assyrians had taken over the other kingdoms that they had, faced. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come, and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they did help him. And this was to say, all the channels of water that were not in the city, they basically blocked them off. So there was gathered much people together, who stopped all the fountains and the brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, "Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water? So if these Assyrians are coming against us, they're going to lay siege, more than likely, because Jerusalem was a defense city, a fortress." And so the idea here was they shouldn't have access to the water that's around, or else then that gives them the advantage. They can use that water, and it can make the siege easier for them. So they stopped it. And he strengthened himself and built up the wall that was broken, and raised it up to the towers, and another wall without, and repaired Milo in the city of David, and made darts and shields in abundance. And he set captains of war over the people, and gathered them together to him in the street of the gate of the city, and spake comfortably to them, saying, "Be strong and courageous, be not afraid nor dismayed for the king of Assyria, for all the multitude that is with him, nor for all the multitude that is with him, for there be more with us than with him." Understanding the power of the Lord, Hezekiah said this to exhort the men of war here and the captains and so on. "With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord Yahweh our God, to help us and to fight our battles." And that arm of flesh, meaning that his power is in flesh, like man. All right, and man against God, obviously we know who wins that. And the people rested themselves upon the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. So that, any anxiety or stress that might have come with, damn, the Assyrians, they did this to the northern kingdom, remember? They've been taking over this, that, and the third. How are we going to stand up against them? All that, it calmed their nerves, having been exhorted by Hezekiah to trust in the Lord. After this did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, send his servants to Jerusalem. So when he came to that region, what later came to be known as like Judea, he didn't start at Jerusalem, right? As we're reading here, it says, "But he himself laid siege against Lachish, and all his power with him." So his army and his host, they were at Lachish, right, which is another area, another city. And while he was there laying siege to them, he sent his servants. And we read this in the book of Kings, but he sent his servants to, I think, Rabshakeh and a few others to Jerusalem to go and give this message to Hezekiah. "On to Hezekiah, king of Judah, and to all Judah that were at Jerusalem, saying, Thus saith Sennacherib, king of Assyria, Whereon do ye trust, that ye abide in the siege of Jerusalem? Doth not Hezekiah persuade you to give over yourselves to die by famine and by thirst, saying, The Lord our God shall deliver us out of the hand of the king of Assyria? So basically he's saying, look, like, why are you guys thinking that you're, staying in here and trying to endure this siege is going to do you any good? Hezekiah is pretty much like, he's pretty much deceived you guys to just throw your lives away and die by famine and thirst by selling you wolf tickets about trusting in your God. That's what the servants here, or i.e. the message coming from Sennacherib, is. Hath not the same Hezekiah taken away his high places and his altars, and commanded Judah and Jerusalem, saying, Ye shall worship before one altar and burn incense upon it? And showing you the lack of understanding, right? So they figured that this God that Hezekiah is telling them to trust in, it is that same God's altars that Hezekiah took down, and basically just said, hey, now you just sacrifice upon one, not understanding that Hezekiah really was taking down the altars of these other deities and rearing up the altar of the Lord, because the Lord requires us to sacrifice upon that. Verse 13, Know ye not what I and my fathers have done unto all the people of other lands? Were the gods of the nations of those lands anyways able to deliver their lands out of mine hand? So look at what I did, even to the northern kingdom, right next to you. Were they able to be delivered? All these other countries, these nations that I've conquered, were their gods able to deliver them? And you think you're so special, your God is going to deliver you? Who was there among all the gods of those nations that my fathers utterly destroyed, that could deliver his people out of mine hand? And remember, he's saying my fathers, right? Because, for example, during the time of the siege of Samaria, it wasn't Sennacherib that did that, right? It was going back to Shalmaneser, I believe the fifth, and Sargon. And even prior to that, he had Tiglath-Pileser or Pileser that was ruling at the time. Okay. Anyway, it says here that your God should be able to deliver you out of mine hand. Now therefore, let not Hezekiah deceive you, nor persuade you on this manner, neither yet believe him. For no God of any nation or kingdom was able to deliver his people out of my hand, and out of the hand of my fathers. How much less shall your God deliver you out of mine hand? So he was basically trying to dissuade the people, trying to weaken their hands, make them afraid, and put doubt and fear into their minds, in terms of trusting in the Lord. And his servants spake yet more against the Lord Yahweh and against his servant Hezekiah. He wrote also letters to rail on the Lord Yahweh God of Israel, and to speak against them. To rail in this case, basically if you read like Jeremiah, was the letter of Jeremiah where he speaks about these idols and so on, like that's an example, right? Railing is not speaking good of someone. Saying, as the gods of the other nations, or as the gods of the nations of other lands have not delivered their people out of mine hand, so shall not the God of Hezekiah deliver his people out of mine hand. So in other words, you're going to be just like all the others that I've taken over, that I've conquered. You're not going to survive here. Then they cried with a loud voice in the Jews' speech unto the people of Jerusalem. So remember, in the book of Kings, we read here that they were speaking to Eliakim, I believe was one of them, and a few others. And they told the Assyrians, hey, we understand the Assyrian tongue. Speak to us in that. And they said, what you think we came here to speak to you in private? Nah, we came here to speak to everybody over here so they could know what's really going on. So verse 18, them crying with a loud voice in the Jews' speech was so that they could basically scare everybody that was there. So as it says here, then they cried with a loud voice in the Jews' speech onto the people of Jerusalem that were on the wall, to affright them and to trouble them, that they might take the city. Right. So if these people are afraid and they themselves want to surrender because they don't want to, they feel as though Israel wouldn't survive a siege against the Assyrians, then it would be much easier for the Assyrians to take over. It's propaganda. And they speak against the God of Jerusalem as against the gods of the people of the earth, which were the work of the hands of man. And for this cause Hezekiah the king and the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amos, prayed and cried to heaven. So keeping in mind at this time Isaiah was also on the scene, right, along with Hezekiah. And the Lord Yahweh sent an angel, which cut off all the mighty men of valor, and the leaders, and the captains in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he returned with shame of face to his own land. And this was what we read, the Lord sent an angel that slew about 100, I believe it was 185,000 of Sennacherib's men. And when they woke up the next morning, they were like, oh no. They all got up and fled back to Assyria, back to their own land. So he returned with shame of face to his own land. And when he was come into the house of his God, they that came forth of his own bowels slew him there with the sword. And we went into that history once again in the book of Kings. His sons, I think Sherezer, and as the scriptures call them, and I forgot the other one's name, but they ended up slaying Sennacherib, their own father, committing parricide, but they ended up having to run away because the people were now against them for doing that. And that's what leads to Assyrian coming up into power and reigning. Thus the Lord Yahweh saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib the king of Assyria, and from the hand of all other, and guided them on every side. And many brought gifts unto the Lord Yahweh to Jerusalem, and presents to Hezekiah king of Judah, so that he was magnified in the sight of all nations from thenceforth. So by the Lord delivering him, the Lord gave him favor, the Lord gave him grace, and mercy. In those days Hezekiah was sick to the death, and prayed unto the Lord Yahweh, and spake unto him, and he gave him a sign. And that sickness, Isaiah, the Lord through Isaiah came and told Hezekiah that, hey, you're not going to survive this. You're going to die. Hezekiah ends up weeping, praying for mercy to the Lord. And then the Lord stops Isaiah on his way out and tells him, all right, Hezekiah humbled himself. Go back and tell him I'll give him 15 more years. And Hezekiah asked for a sign to prove that, to show it. And that's where he basically requests that the Lord turn the degrees on the sundial backward. Now remember, the degrees of the sundial just reflects the movement of the sun. So it tells time. Like today, the clock moves, right, from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. and so on. So to reverse it is something that you can't control. It's not like going and taking a clock off of the wall and then, turning the gears in the back to reverse time. This would actually have to be from the actual sun, as in like moving the sun backwards, in order to reflect that on the sundial. So that was the sign the Lord gave Hezekiah, which was sufficient for him concerning that matter. But Hezekiah rendered not again according to the benefit done unto him, for his heart was lifted up. So in other words, Hezekiah's actions, after this, after the mercy and the benefit, the Lord didn't like it. All right. And when you read this, to make it a bit clearer, more plainly in the NLT, it says, but Hezekiah did not respond appropriately to the kindness shown him, and he became proud. So the Lord Yahweh's anger came against him and against Judah and Jerusalem. And this highlights, right, the aspect of human nature, that even regardless of Hezekiah doing all of these things, to please the Lord, there were still certain points where the human element came out, right? Where he wasn't always humble. Not all great men are always, we're not perfect, right? But in this case, the Lord, by Hezekiah becoming proud, the Lord was not happy with that. Therefore, there was wrath upon him and upon Judah and Jerusalem. Notwithstanding, Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart, both he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of the Lord Yahweh came not upon them in the days of Hezekiah. And Hezekiah had exceeding much riches and honor, and he made himself treasuries for silver, and for gold, and for precious stones, and for spices, and for shields, and for all manner of pleasant jewels. Now keep in mind, we're talking about actual riches here. You're reading it, it sounds like words, on a paper or in a book, but the actual physical manifestation of this is a whole lot of gold, silver, like to the point where you have to make, treasuries for it. So he was like, today they would say filthy rich. Storehouses also for the increase of corn and wine and oil, and stalls for all manner of beasts, and coats for flocks. And looking into this word coats here, flocks, are like sheep, cattle. So coats would have like a sheep coat. You could imagine being like an area to keep them, right? So here, a manger, a stall, a crib, where you would house your sheep or your flocks. Moreover, he provided him cities and possessions of flocks and herds in abundance, for God had given him substance very much. And this is why the scriptures say it is a light thing for the Most High to make a man rich. This same Hezekiah also stopped the upper watercourse of Gihon and brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David. And Hezekiah prospered in all his works. And I believe this is referring to Hezekiah's tunnel. Hezekiah's tunnel. Yep. So it says here, Hezekiah's tunnel, also known as the Siloam Tunnel, is an ancient water tunnel carved under the city of David in Jerusalem, built during the reign of King Hezekiah to secure the city's water supply from the Gihon spring to the pool of Siloam. And this is a natural find. Like where do you think these images are coming from, right? They actually went there and they saw this here. So this is the actual tunnel that is being referred to here in 2 Chronicles Chapter 32, verse 30, right? So that you can look it up and read more about it as Hezekiah's tunnel. And Hezekiah prospered in all his works. Howbeit in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, God left him to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. So once again, the parallel of this is in the book of Kings, 2 Kings, and it goes into when the Babylonians sent messengers onto Hezekiah. They said they heard that he was sick, and so they came, they say, hey, what's going on? And he showed them everything he had, right? Isaiah comes and confronts him afterwards and asks him like, hey, what did you show them? And he said, oh, I showed them everything. He said, guess what? These same Babylonians that you showed everything to, they're going to come and take you and all Judah captive. But it's not going to happen during your time. So interestingly enough here, verse 31 is a very interesting point, that when this happened, right, the Lord, as it says, when they came to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, so likely they had some specific questions, probably, hey, what happened with the whole Sennacherib situation, or this, that, and the third. The Most High left him, i.e. to see, without influencing Hezekiah left or right, but to see what answer he would come with, so the Lord could see what manner of individual he is, right? I.e. all that was in his heart. For example, when the Lord had Saul enter that cave and David had the upper hand to slay him, right? You can imagine a situation like that where the Lord is like, okay, let's see what David does. I won't like put it as a situation where even if David wanted to, he couldn't kill him or anything that hinders him. but he has full liberty. He can either show mercy or he can slay him. Let's see what he does. Right. So a similar sort of along those lines of the Most High leaving him to do what he will, and the Lord would basically look at that and see. And that's something that I found interesting because, we can keep that in mind, right? There are certain situations you go through and you never know when it's those situations. There's some that the Lord has the Spirit guide you to make a certain decision. And there's some where the Lord just leaves you and he's like, I want to see what you do in this situation. How do you handle that? So always keep that in mind. Those are parts of the ways the Lord tests you, especially your integrity and your character, to see what manner of individual you are. Verse 32, now the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his goodness, behold, they are written in the vision of Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, and in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the chiefest of the sepulchres of the sons of David. And all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did him honor at his death, and Manasseh his son reigned in his stead. And that brings us to the end of the book of 2 Chronicles, the 32nd chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kudash. And until next time, Shalom.